a quiet home, everything was peaceful. The soft laughter of children echoed through the walls as they played, unaware of the silent danger creeping closer with every passing second. The parents were sitting together, enjoying the warmth of the evening, completely oblivious to what was about to unfold. And at their feet, lying peacefully by the door, was Max, loyal, loving, and ever-present. To them, he was just a dog. But Max was more than that. He was family. He had been there through the highs and the lows, sharing in the joy of their happiest moments, comforting them during the hardest. For Max, every day was an opportunity to love them, to protect them in ways they might never even realize. But tonight, everything was about to change. The fire that would soon threaten their lives didn't announce itself with a loud crash or an obvious warning. It began small, unnoticed. A single spark in the kitchen, slowly smoldering in the background. The flames crept toward the walls, unseen, as smoke started to fill the house. The family continued their evening, unaware of the deadly danger surrounding them. But Max wasn't like the rest of them. Max sensed it. Max felt it. His instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. He rose from his spot on the floor, ears alert, nose twitching. His eyes darted toward the kitchen, where the faintest smell of smoke was starting to waft through the air. Max didn't wait. He didn't hesitate. He knew. Something was wrong, and he was the only one who could save them. As the fire began to grow, Max's every sense was on high alert. His mind raced. He had to act fast, before it was too late. The love he had for this family wasn't just in his bones, it was in his very heart. And with that love, Max would do anything to protect them, even if it meant facing danger alone. Max's heart raced as the smell of smoke grew stronger. He knew the family couldn't smell it yet. They were still going about their evening, their laughter filling the air, unaware of the growing danger. But Max wasn't about to let that happen. He needed to wake them up. He needed to warn them, now. Max dashed into the kitchen, his paws slipping slightly on the tile floor. His eyes darted around frantically. The smoke was thickening, the air growing heavy. He could feel the heat starting to rise, but it wasn't enough to stop him. His job was clear. He had to alert them. Max barked, his voice breaking the quiet of the house. Once, twice, a loud, desperate bark. He paused for a moment, waiting, hoping someone would hear him. Nothing. The house was still too quiet. Max's eyes flicked to the door of the living room where the family was sitting. Without hesitation, he bounded down the hallway, each step more urgent than the last. He reached the living room and jumped up onto the couch, his tail wagging, trying to get their attention. He barked again, louder this time, his eyes locked on them with a mixture of panic and determination. The mother looked at him, a small smile spreading across her face. "What's the matter, Max? What's going on?" she asked, chuckling lightly. Max didn't have time for her questions. He didn't have time for anything but getting them out. He gave a sharp bark, louder, more insistent this time. His paws dug into the cushions as he pawed at her lap. His frantic energy was impossible to ignore now. Something was wrong. And then she heard it. A soft crackling sound from the kitchen, the sound of a fire, quietly growing out of control. Her smile faded as her eyes widened in realization. She glanced toward the kitchen, the smoke starting to seep into the living room. Her heart skipped a beat. She grabbed her husband's arm, pulling him to his feet. "We need to go. Now," she shouted. Max's work wasn't over. He watched them, his eyes urging them to follow, knowing that every second mattered. He turned, running toward the door, glancing over his shoulder to make sure they were right behind him. He wasn't about to stop until they were safe.
Max didn't wait. He had done his part, and now it was up to the family to follow his lead. With every step, the heat from the kitchen grew stronger, and the smoke filled the air, thick and suffocating. Max ran toward the front door, glancing back over his shoulder to make sure the family was right behind him. The children, now wide-eyed with confusion, scrambled to keep up, the mother grabbing their hands, her face pale with panic. Her husband, still stunned, reached for the phone, but Max's urgent barking snapped him back to the reality of the situation. There was no time for calls, no time for hesitation. Max paused for a split second, watching the family's every move. He barked once more, guiding them forward. His paws tapped rapidly against the hardwood floor as he ran toward the door, his whole body telling them to hurry. The family followed, their hearts pounding in their chests. The door to safety was just a few steps away, but the air was thick with smoke now, and the flames in the kitchen were racing toward them, licking at the walls with fierce hunger. Max, without a second thought, pushed open the door with his nose, the cool night air rushing in, offering a brief sense of relief. But Max didn't stop there. He dashed out into the yard and circled back to the doorway, watching to make sure the family was right behind him. His tail wagged frantically, urging them to hurry, to move faster. He didn't care about the danger surrounding him. All that mattered was getting them to safety. The mother was the first to step outside, her arms wrapped tightly around the children. She took one look at Max, the dog that had just saved their lives, and whispered a prayer of thanks. Her eyes were filled with tears, but it was Max who held her gaze. He looked up at her, his eyes wide and full of concern, as though saying, "Is everyone safe?" Behind them, the house was starting to catch fire. The flames were now visible, breaking through the windows and licking at the night sky. The sound of crackling wood filled the air, echoing in the distance. But it didn't matter. They were safe now, thanks to Max. As the family stood outside, gasping for breath, the house behind them was quickly consumed by flames. The crackling of the fire grew louder, a deafening reminder of how close they had come to disaster. They stood there, frozen for a moment, taking in the reality of what had just happened. Their home, their sanctuary, was now burning, but they were alive. They were safe. And the reason they were standing there, breathing, was Max. Max, standing at their feet, looked up at them. His fur was singed slightly, the smell of smoke still clinging to him, but he didn't seem to notice. He sat calmly, his tail wagging slightly, his eyes meeting theirs with a quiet understanding. He had done his job. He had saved them. The family huddled together, relief flooding over them in waves. The children clung to their mother, their eyes wide with fear, still trying to process what had just happened. But they were here, and they were safe. They held on to Max as if he were the only thing keeping the world from falling apart. In that moment, the father looked down at Max, his face filled with awe. He crouched down and gently ran his hand over Max's head, tears welling up in his eyes. "You saved us," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Max looked up at him, his tail wagging slowly, as if to say, "Of course I did. I'm here for you." Fire trucks began to arrive in the distance, their sirens cutting through the night air, signaling that help had come. But for the family, the real hero was already standing right in front of them. The firefighters rushed past them, heading toward the house, but none of it seemed to matter. The only thing that mattered now was that they were together. And they had Max. Max, the dog who had gone beyond his instincts. Max, the dog who had saved their lives. As the fire trucks continued to douse the flames, the family stood together in the yard, their eyes never leaving Max. The house that had once been filled with laughter, warmth, and memories was now a shell of its former self, consumed by the fire. Yet, despite the devastation, there was something they all knew for certain. If it hadn't been for Max, they wouldn't be standing here right now. They owed him everything. Max, still by their side, looked up at them with his ever-loyal eyes as if to say, "It's okay now. You're safe." The family was silent, their hearts filled with gratitude and tears that no one tried to hide. The father knelt beside Max, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke. "You're more than just a dog. You're our hero." Max responded with a gentle nudge, his head resting against the father's knee. The mother stroked Max's fur, her hands shaking with relief. "You kept us safe," she said softly. "You're the reason we're here." For the children, there were no words, only hugs. They wrapped their small arms around Max, holding on to him as if they never wanted to let go. They had witnessed firsthand how the unlikeliest of heroes, this playful, loving dog, had become their protector, their savior. Behind them, the fire was now mostly under control, but the damage had been done. Still, there was a sense of peace now. A sense of security. The worst was over, the family was alive, and they had Max to thank for that. Max, the dog who had done more than anyone could have imagined. The dog who had sensed danger before anyone else, who had acted without hesitation, and who had led his family to safety. Max had become their guardian angel in the form of a furry companion. He had turned the impossible into the possible, simply because he loved them. As the night settled in and the fire trucks slowly pulled away, the family knew one thing for certain: they would never take Max for granted again. The bond between them had deepened in a way they could never have imagined. He was no longer just a pet, he was family, and he was their hero. As the days passed, the fire's devastation lingered in the air, but the family's bond with Max only grew stronger. The house would take time to rebuild, and there were difficult days ahead, but there was something different now. They knew they could face whatever came next, as long as they had Max by their side. Every day, Max remained the constant. His love, his loyalty, everything about him spoke volumes. The children, still processing the terrifying events, had a new sense of comfort when Max was near. Their laughter returned, this time with more joy, more gratitude. Max had given them the most precious gift of all: life. And now, as the days stretched on, it was clear that Max's place in their lives would never be the same. It wasn't just the heroic act that made him special. It was the quiet moments that followed. Max would lay by the door, his eyes constantly watching over the family, making sure they were safe. He would nuzzle them gently in the morning, comforting them when the memories of the fire would start to feel too real. The trauma of what they'd survived lingered, but with Max, they found healing. He had shown them that the bonds of love and loyalty were stronger than anything. One afternoon, as they sat together in the yard, the father looked down at Max, his voice quiet but filled with awe. "You know, you've taught us something we'll never forget. That even in the worst moments, we can find strength. You saved us, and we'll never be able to thank you enough." Max, sitting at their feet, let out a gentle sigh, his eyes soft as he gazed at them, as if to say, "You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what I meant to do." He wasn't looking for praise. He wasn't looking for anything in return. He was simply doing what love asked of him. And for the family, that was more than enough. In a world full of uncertainty, Max had shown them that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they have 4 paws and an unbreakable heart. The weeks that followed the fire brought moments of both grief and gratitude. The house was gone, but the family's sense of security had been rebuilt, brick by brick, with Max by their side. They started to restore the pieces of their life that the fire had taken. It wasn't easy. The memories of the flames, the smoke, the fear, it all weighed heavy on their hearts. But every step forward was easier with Max in their lives, his steady presence a reminder that not all was lost. One evening, as the sun began to set, the family gathered in the yard once more. The father, who had spent days cleaning up the debris from the fire, stopped for a moment to watch Max. The dog had returned to his playful self, chasing after the children as they ran across the yard, their laughter filling the air. It was a sound they had feared they might never hear again after the fire, but now it rang out like a symphony of joy. Max had made that possible. Max had given them back their peace of mind, and now he was giving them back their happiness. The father walked over to Max, sitting on the ground beside him. "You've done more than anyone could ever ask for, Max," he said softly, resting his hand on the dog's head. Max looked up at him, his eyes filled with calm, unwavering loyalty. The father paused for a moment, taking in the fullness of what Max had done. It wasn't just about the fire. It was about everything. Max had been there for them through thick and thin, sharing in their most difficult times and their happiest moments. He wasn't just a pet. He was family. The children ran up to their father, pulling him into the game as Max chased after them, tail wagging furiously. For the first time since the fire, the father allowed himself to truly relax. The fire may have taken their home, but it had not taken their spirit, and it certainly hadn't taken Max. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, the family gathered together. Max lay at their feet, content and calm. They had found a new sense of peace, and they knew that as long as Max was with them, they would always be okay. As time passed, the family began to move forward, rebuilding their lives piece by piece. The new house was coming together, but there was always a sense of something missing. The physical structure might have been restored, but it was the love, the protection, and the loyalty of Max that had truly made their house a home again. Max, despite the trauma of the fire, had returned to his playful, goofy self. He had become more than just the protector of the family. He had become the heart of it. Every wag of his tail, every soft nuzzle, every bark that echoed through the air, it was a reminder of the love he gave so freely. The family had never truly understood the depth of his devotion until that night, until the fire. Now, every moment with him felt like a gift. One afternoon, while the family was enjoying a quiet moment together in the new backyard, the father pulled out a small package from his jacket pocket. The children looked on with curiosity as he slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a small, engraved plaque. It read, "Max, our hero." The father held it up for everyone to see. "Max," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "this is for you. You've saved us in ways we can't even begin to explain. You were there for us when we needed you most and we'll never forget it." Max, ever humble, simply laid his head down on the grass and closed his eyes, as if to say, "I'm just doing my job." But in his heart, he knew what this meant. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a hero. The family gathered around him, each of them kneeling down to place a gentle hand on Max's head. The children kissed his fur. The father hugged him tightly. For the first time in weeks, the weight of the fire, the destruction, and the fear began to lift. The future seemed a little brighter with Max by their side. Max didn't need recognition. He didn't need anything but love, and he gave it in abundance. The family understood now. The real hero wasn't the house they were rebuilding. It wasn't the new things they were buying to replace what they'd lost. It was Max, the one who had saved them, the one who had reminded them what really mattered: family, love, and loyalty. As the days stretched into months, the family's life began to stabilize. The new house was nearly finished, the scars from the fire beginning to fade. Yet, there was something deeper that had changed, something unspoken but always present. The family had grown closer, not just to each other, but to Max. He had changed everything. Each morning began with the familiar sound of Max's paws tapping lightly against the floor, announcing the start of another day. The children would scramble out of bed, their first stop always to Max, giving him a hug and a kiss. It had become a ritual, one that filled the house with warmth and joy, something they had missed during the days of recovery. Max had given them back their mornings, their smiles, and their laughter. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, the father paused before taking his first bite. Looking around at the table, he smiled softly, then turned to Max, who was lying peacefully at their feet. "We have something very special in our lives," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "And it's not just this house or the things we have. It's Max. He's the reason we're all here. He's the reason we're okay." The children, without missing a beat, turned to Max, their faces lighting up with adoration. "Thank you, Max," they said in unison, their voices filled with sincerity. Max's tail thumped on the ground as he looked up at them, his eyes soft and full of love. For a moment the family sat in silence, each person reflecting on how much Max had done for them. He had not only saved their lives that night, but had also helped them rediscover what truly mattered: the love they shared with each other and with him. He had turned a tragedy into an opportunity for deeper connection, a reminder that heroes come in all forms, even in the shape of a furry companion. Max, the hero who didn't seek recognition, who didn't ask for praise, had given them the greatest gift: the strength to move forward, to rebuild, and to find joy again. And the family knew one thing: they would never forget the sacrifice, the courage, and the unwavering love Max had shown them. He had not only saved them from the fire, he had saved them from losing the very thing that mattered most: each other. As the months went by, life slowly returned to a new sense of normalcy. The fire had left its marks on the family, but it had also given them something invaluable: a new perspective. They had learned that the things they once took for granted, the small moments of everyday life, were the true treasures. And through it all, Max was the constant: steady, loyal, and forever by their side. One day, as the family gathered outside to celebrate their new beginning, the father stood at the center of the yard, a smile on his face. "You know," he said, glancing at the family and then down at Max, "there's nothing more powerful than the bond between a family and a dog. Max didn't just save us that night. He taught us what it means to love unconditionally, to protect with everything you have, and to give without expecting anything in return." Max, as always, was right there with them. his tail wagging in delight, as if he knew he had earned his place not just in their home, but in their hearts forever. The children ran around, playing their favorite games, their laughter echoing through the yard. The house was filled with new memories, ones that Max would help them create, ones they would cherish for years to come. The family had a new understanding of what it meant to truly live. It wasn't about the material things they had lost, or even what they had gained in the process of rebuilding. It was about love. And Max had shown them that love can come in the most unexpected forms. Max had saved them not just from the fire but from losing sight of what was truly important. He had reminded them that life is fragile, but love is the glue that holds everything together. As the sun set behind the horizon, casting its golden glow across the yard, the family sat down together, their arms around each other, Max lying contentedly by their feet. They knew that as long as they had each other, and as long as they had Max, they would always be okay. And with that thought, the family finally understood. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they have 4 paws, a wagging tail, and a heart full of love.